Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Royal House of Vere, coming down to the cadet branch, which would be the House of Drayton, and coming at you from opponent as English people of North America. And tonight we're just going to take a voyage into the past, and we're going to search out through those historical documents exactly the criteria that is used by Parliament, and in conjunction and pursuant to working with the King, exactly what it is that's applicable when it comes to succession, right? When it comes to those claims that were made by various branches of the different houses, and what qualified it. So, I think a good place to start would be with Blackstone's commentary. He was one of the foremost historical sources that we can draw upon, aside from Blackstone and several others. But, Blackstone is one that comes to mind, when we talk about things as it relates to government. So let's take a quick view of that as we look at the website of my ancestors, which would be the Veres. As you can see, there are many different things in here as it relates to my family. You see some of the coats of arms. You see our motto, Vil Nero Nihil Verus, which means nothing is truer than truth. The boar, which is the emblem of the House of Vere. Okay. You see Hedingham Castle right there, Hedingham Castle, where Empress Matilda stayed at for a short time, and many other of the so-called royals came by the castle to visit, to parlay. Okay. You can see some of the other things here. The House of Truth, official house of the Vere family records. This is from BC to 2014, and you guys can go to this website and visit it, and you can look at a couple of things on here on this website. I found it to be very informative. It tells you about here, as you can see, Vere is derived from Latin influence, and Vere's family of the Roman Empire. It goes into a little bit about the motto, and Vere is the truth or to be truth. Okay. It also goes into some of the stories that are attributed to legend with the Vere family, my family. Okay. There's some good things in here that particularly if you are or you do come down from this bloodline, that can put you on a fruitful and enthusiastic track, because there's so much information here that one can really get excited about, and it even has some of the other names of families that, as you can see here, the Veres that we intermingle with, that we married: the Bigards, the Cantaloupes, the St. Clairs, the De Quincys, the Ufers, the Mortimers, the Scropes. You got the Howards here, the Nevilles, the Courtenays, all these families out here with these renowned surnames. In fact, I give you a roll call now. If you are, in fact, watching this particular podcast, and you come by the surname of Bogard or St. Clair or De Quincy, give me a shout out. Go on my inbox and let me know where you're at, and maybe we can reconnect on a certain degree, because we are family. There's no doubt about it. So that's something that you guys, could do if you do, in fact, come down from those particular bloodlines and therefore surname. Now, once again, you see the faces of these individuals here as it relates to artistic license. And for those who have been following me from time to time, we know that these pictures may not reflect necessarily the actual look of my family, because I am a person of carbon hue, but nonetheless, this is the picture that we have available. I do have some other ones that do reflect the quote unquote colored version, but these are the versions that they give here now. So just to alleviate any confusion that may come about from you guys looking at this and saying, well, wait a minute, there's this guy was quote unquote black or brown or whatever, if you want to relate it to a color appellation. But I am of carbon hued, and I've already done the research, and believe me, the De Veres and therefore the Draytons are people of carbon hue. But this is the representation that they give here. Here's one here where you can see that he is carbon hued here. You can check it out. And I plan on making a visit to England, where I can actually go to some of the estates that we still have, and we have the family pictures in there, which are still of the original ilk. I thought that we could, yeah. So here you can see here Vere, the revealing of Vere, the noblest subject in England, and indeed, as Englishmen love to say, the noblest subject in Europe. Lord Edward de Vere, Sir Francis, and Lord Horace Vere aroused the spirit of American colonization. And yes, we did spearhead a lot of the colonization voyages that took place in the 15th century. Even if you go back to the quote-unquote colonization of Ireland, you had some Veres. In fact, we already had some Veres over in Ireland who had settled there, and therefore, had a lot to do with the colonization of Ireland being successful to a degree. Not all the way, but we're not taking all the credit. But we were over there actively working in terms of trying to settle in that area, which would be considered to be an overseas possession. Okay, and as you can see here, some other things here. Virginia Charter, which quite naturally we were the co-authors of. We were also the co-authors of the Bill of Rights of 1689, 1688. We're also the co-authors of the Magna Carta, which Robert de Vere was one of the sureties of that. So, and from that standpoint, if you yourself who may be watching this, if you have any ancestors that were present or who were signatories to the Magna Carta, to the Declaration of Independence, even to the Constitution, those are rights that are only secured if you claim them. So, in other words, we can't claim the rights of our predecessors just by merely observing them. We have to actually, go out there and we have to make it known that our ancestors were the signatories and that they, through primogeniture, so to speak, have passed down those rights to us, and we claim those rights. So that's something that you guys can also look into too. Okay. All right. So we're gonna move into Blackstone's commentaries. Okay, people, I'm back with you here, Stone Live back at Epona, and right now we're looking at the students' Blackstone Commentaries, the Laws of England. As I said before, Sir William Blackstone is one of the foremost leaders in the historical documentation of the laws that, as they applied to England. So let's now look at the rules and regulation and the laws as it applies to the sovereign. Okay, let's check this out. I think here, let's go down here and let's go to page 40. All right, so as you can see here, the sovereign, chapter 3. Okay, then it says of the sovereign and his title. Okay. Then down below that it says the crown hereditary, title defeasible by act of parliament, meaning that parliament can forfeit the title if they see fit. Okay, so it's not indefeasible. Indefeasible means that it can't be taken away. Defeasible means that parliament can take it. Okay, so it says the crown hereditary, title defeasible by act of parliament, historical view of the succession, Revolution of 1688, and the Act of Settlement. As you know, the Act of Settlement occurred in 1701, and that's precipitated the Act of Union, which came about in 1707 by Queen Anne. So let's start to read here. It says the supreme executive power of these kingdoms is vested by our laws in a single person, meaning the king, right? The king or queen. For it matters not to which sex the crown descends, but the person entitled to it, whether male or female, is immediately invested with all of the ensigns, rights, and prerogatives of sovereign power. This power being thus vested in a single person, it became necessary to the freedom and peace of the state that a rule should be laid down to mark out with precision who is that single person, to whom are committed the care and protection of the community, and to whom in return the allegiance of every individual is due. And our Constitution accordingly has not left us in the dark upon this material occasion. Okay, so now you see here, it gives you a brief glimpse into some of the responsibilities, even on a minute level, that the king is responsible for. Okay, and as you can see, it says the power being thus vested in a single person, it became necessary to the freedom and peace of the state that a rule should be laid down to mark out with precision who is that single person to whom are committed the care and protection, to whom are committed the care and protection of the community. So it's not just about, getting up on the throne and exercising, prerogatives and rights, that are only beneficial to you in your office. It's about you protecting the people, protecting the religion, protecting the community. You understand what I'm saying? As each individual, one by one, and as the entire whole. So this is a serious responsibility that one undertakes when he becomes king of a nation. Let's go forward. The grand fundamental maxim upon which the jura courants, or right of succession to the throne of these kingdoms, depends, I take to be this, that the crown is, by common law and constitutional custom, hereditary, and this in a manner peculiar to itself, but that the right of inheritance may from time to time be changed or limited by act of parliament. Okay, so basically, parliament has the power to change a succession. In other words, if there's a king that, maybe he is Catholic and he has a son, and that son is slated to inherit the throne, which in the case is what happened with James, right? James V. Was it James V? No, it was James VI. No, James the VII and the second of England. And then he, quite naturally was an open Catholic. And, when Parliament found out about it, essentially when he passed the throne to which would have been his successor in the form of his heir, who would have been also Catholic. They said no. They said no, that's not going to happen, and therefore we're going to have to settle on something else. And then it descended upon William and Mary, and so that it would happen. And so then William, who outlasted Mary, ended up being the sovereign. As it relates to that particular time frame. So Parliament does have the power in certain circumstances to override a successor. Okay. First, it is in general hereditary or descendable to the next heir on the death or demise of the last proprietor. Yet while I assert an hereditary, I by no means intend a jura divino, meaning that by divine right. So it's not by divine right that the title is conferred upon you. Okay, to the throne. Such a title may have subsisted under the theocratic establishments of the children of Israel and Palestine, but it never yet subsisted in any country, so that the hereditary right, which the Lords of England acknowledge, owes its origin to the founders of our Constitution and to them only. So therefore, the hereditary rights that were exercised in medieval times and in the 16th, 15th, going back to, let's say, Cerdic, and the Jawasi tribes coming up until William the Conqueror, going all the way up until the revolutions. Those were strictures that was set solely by, let's say, the Church Council, coming up to the Wittegemont, coming up to the Cure Regis, coming up to Parliament. Those were strictures that were set down by them and were exercised by them solely. Okay, so they like I said before, Parliament ultimately, particularly when you're talking about after the 17th century, exercised that power solely. Okay, so let's get back here. So that the hereditary right, which the Lords of England acknowledge, owes its origin to the founders of our Constitution and to them only. They might, if they had thought proper, have made it an elective monarchy, but they rather chose to establish originally a succession by inheritance. This has been acquiesced in by general consent and ripened by degrees into common law, the very same title that every private man has to his own estate. Lands are not naturally descendable any more than thrones, but the law has thought proper, for the benefit and peace of the public, to establish hereditary succession in the one as well as the other. Okay, so as long as Parliament is in compliance with the heir, and long as he is in compliance with the common law as it relates to England, there will be a successorship as it pertains to that heir. Anything to the contrary, and it won't happen. Okay? All right, let's go here. But secondly, as to the particular mode of inheritance, it in general corresponds with the feudal path of descents chalked out by the law in succession to landed estates. Like estates, the crown would descend lineally to the issue of the reigning monarch, as it did from King John to Richard II, through a regular pedigree of 6 lineal generations. As in common descents, the preference of males to females and the right of primogeniture among the males are strictly adhered to. Okay, so when you're talking about primogeniture, you're talking about from one male to the next succeeding male, from father to son. If let's say if the oldest son, for whatever reason, cannot perform in that particular office, maybe he was killed or maybe he has a severe deformity, it will then descend down to the nearest next of kin. So that would be a form of primogeniture. Okay, among the males are strictly adhered to. Thus, Edward V succeeded to the crown in preference to Richard, his younger brother, and Elizabeth, his elder sister. Like lands or tenements, the crown, on failure of the male line, descends to the issue female. Thus, Mary I succeeded to Edward VI, and the line of Margaret, Queen of Scots, the daughter of Henry VII, succeeded on failure of the line of Henry VIII. Remember, Henry VIII's son, Edward VI, died, I believe, when he was 15. So therefore, that's how it succeeded down to, or descended down to, Queen Elizabeth. And remember, Queen Elizabeth had no heirs. So essentially, with the death of Queen Elizabeth, you had the death of Henry VIII. So therefore, it had to recur back to Henry VII. And Henry VII, I believe, had married Elizabeth of York. So that's what happened there. So since you couldn't get an heir from Henry VII, right, through Elizabeth, because she was heirless, it reverts back to the next close to kin, which is Henry VII, who was Henry VIII's father. Okay. But among the females, the crown descends by right of primogeniture to the eldest daughter only in her issue, and not as in common inheritances to all the daughters at once. The evident necessity of sole succession to the throne having occasioned the royal law of descents to depart from the common law in this respect. And therefore Queen Mary, on the death of her brother, succeeded to the crown alone, and not in partnership with her sister Elizabeth. Okay, right. So she descended to the throne. I believe, is that Mary, Queen of Scots? Right, and she was older than Elizabeth too. No, in fact, that's Mary. Yeah, that's Mary. That was Henry the Eighth's second daughter, I believe, or first daughter. But I know she was older than Elizabeth, and she succeeded to the throne. In fact, that was Bloody Mary. That's the one who was uh, putting a lot of the Protestants to the fire. She was she was a terror. Okay, then when she passed, it descended down to Elizabeth. Okay, and again, the doctrine of representation prevails in the descent of the crown, as it does in other inheritances, whereby the lineal descents of any person deceased stand in the same place as their ancestor, if living, would have done. Thus, Richard II succeeded his grandfather, Edward III, in right of his father, the Black Prince, through the exclusion of all of his uncles, his grandfather's younger children. Lastly, on failure of lineal descendants, the crown goes to the next collateral relations of the late king, provided they are lineally descended from the blood royal. That is, from the royal stock which originally acquired the crown. See, so just because you may carry a surname from a certain bloodline doesn't mean that you would necessarily have a claim to the throne unless you were lineally descended from that particular individual who, let's say in this case, like Henry VIII, who was king. So it would be his sons that would have a claim. And then after that, now if Henry VIII has, let's say, a brother or in his case, a father, it reverts back to the father because quite naturally the father and the son are lineal and blood descent. Okay, so just because you have a surname from a certain family, that doesn't mean that you have a claim to the throne. So you have to find out exactly who that person in your family with that surname is connected to as it relates to the royal blood, especially if you want to make a claim to a throne. So that has to be clear, and it's spelled out right here. Okay. Let's see here where we at. Lastly, on failure of lineal descendants, the crown goes to the next collateral relations of the late king, provided they are lineally descended from the blood royal. See? That's very important. Provided they are lineally descended from the blood royal, that is, from the royal stock, which originally acquired the crown. See? So your surname may not have originated from the original or the blood royal stock. Maybe originated from a cousin who was related to, the blood royal. Okay, through an uncle. It wasn't directly related to that blood royal. Yeah, y'all are still related, but you're not directly related to the blood royal. Okay, so that has to be clear. See, just like in my pedigree, the Draytons going back to the so-called Veers. I'm lineally descended through my great grandfather, who is my great grandfather or my grandfather's direct blood, and he goes directly back to Aubrey one. So it's lineal descent. I'm lineally descended from Aubrey one, who came in quite naturally with William the Conqueror. So I have that on paper. I can directly place my people in terms of being lineally descended to what would be, in this case, let's say the royal blood. So my bloodline descends directly down from the royal blood, not a cousin, not three cousins away, or uncle who's related. He was the brother of the royal. No, it has to be directly from his body. That's how it goes. Doesn't mean you're not related. Yeah, you are related, but you're just not off of that specific individual. Okay. Okay, thus Henry I succeeded to William II, John to Richard I, and James I to Elizabeth, being all derived from the conqueror, who was then the only regal stock. Okay, so let's look at that again. As a matter of fact, let's look at it from here. Lastly, on failure of lineal descendants, the crown goes to the next collateral relations of the late king. Okay, so this is what happened. with Elizabeth going back to Henry VII, okay? Because Elizabeth, like I said, had no heir. So went back to the late king, who was Henry VIII, but then since Elizabeth represented him, it goes back to his father. Okay, provided they are lineally descended from the blood royal, that is from the royal stock, which originally acquired the crown. Right. So Henry VIII was directly off of Henry VII. All right, who was the one who inherited the crown, whether it was by conquest or not. He still inherited the crown, and obviously it was confirmed through Parliament. Parliament confirmed it. Okay, so thus Henry I succeeded to William II. Okay, Henry I succeeded to William II, John to Richard I, and James I to Elizabeth, being all derived from the conqueror. So these individuals here, Henry I, William II, John, Richard I, all lineally descend from the conqueror, who was then the only regal stock. Okay, now the conqueror was also well, by virtue of the appellation conqueror, we know that he, by conquest, inherited the throne. But he didn't conquer the people or the nation, he conquered an individual, which is why essentially the laws of England at that time stayed the same. They stayed intact. It wasn't a conquest of the people. It was a conquest of two individuals who fought for the throne. So that's why, essentially, in terms of the laws of England, nothing changed. Therefore, even hereditary right didn't change. So he inherited that by virtue of Parliament, or in this case, the Witan, acknowledging that he was the king. Okay. All right, let's go here. The doctrine of hereditary right does by no means imply an indefeasible right to the throne. Like I said, doesn't mean that you can't have the throne taken from you. Parliament can or at that time, Witan can take it from you. You know, it is unquestionably in the breast of the supreme legislative authority, which is Parliament, right? The king being the executive authority, but Parliament is the supreme legislative authority of this kingdom to defeat this hereditary right, of this kingdom being the kingdom of England, to defeat this hereditary right, and by particular limitations and provisions, to exclude the immediate heir and vested inheritance in anyone else. Very important, ladies and gentlemen. That's very important. And that really, that statement there should clear up any disputes about, what Parliament and what the king can do in situations where there's no, mutual consideration as it relates to the successor, or the one is to directly inherit. If Parliament, who has the supreme legislative authority, says no, then it's a no-go. So this is why we know, in lieu of the conquest of William the Conqueror, and even in the conquest of Henry VII, that because because Parliament didn't disagree. Okay, and we know that from the documents, that he was in fact considered to be the king of that nation and the king of that kingdom. Okay. But fourthly, however, the crown may be limited or transferred, it still retains its descendable quality and becomes hereditary in the wearer of it. And hence the king is said to never die. So because there is always an heir or successor, and for that reason, they must always have a successor or an heir, so that the office of king never dies, okay? So, and hence the king is said to never die in his political capacity, though in common with other men, he is subject to mortality in his natural, meaning yes, kings die, but as long as we have a successor, then metaphorically and symbolically and legally, the king never dies, okay? Let's take a break for a second, people.